this video, we're going to talk about primarily the battles of Trenton and Princeton, and the struggle that's going on in the Middle States, including certainly New York. So let's get started, and we're going to start off with just a quick review of where we've been. So if we go back kind of to the Revolutionary era, the beginning of that, we think of that as before the Declaration of Independence even. So the issues of taxation without representation leading to protests like the Boston Tea Party, ultimately leading to the Intolerable Acts, which really unites the colonies in a way it hadn't before with the First Continental Congress. Then we see the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere take place just prior to and warning everybody about the battles of Lexington and Concord. Fort Ticonderoga is seized by Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, and when they do that, they capture lots of cannons. The Second Continental Congress, we haven't really talked about this a lot, but the Second Continental Congress at this time appoints George Washington as the commander of the Continental Army and basically names the militia, the Massachusetts militia, the Continental Army. And so now these people that have signed up to be in the militia are part of the Continental Army if they agree. Then the Battle of Bunker Hill happens. Now Washington hasn't yet made it there to Massachusetts by this time. And then Common Sense is published, which is encouraging people to support declaring independence in January of 1776. The Siege of Boston takes place. So those cannons that were at Fort Ticonderoga are dragged down to Boston. The city of Boston is basically held by the British. The British military is there, and they are in command, and so they've got their ships in the harbor, and all of a sudden one morning they wake up, and the colonists, the militia, who've been surrounding the city already, have brought those cannons, and they've placed them up on the Dorchester Heights outside of Boston, and they are aimed down not only at the city of Boston, but more importantly at the ships in the harbor, the British Navy in the harbor. And so they realize right away they've got to get out of there, or their navy will be that portion of their navy will be lost. So Boston is freed, and that British Navy and the British Army is not going to just go back home. They're going to go somewhere. And then the next big event is the Declaration of Independence, which we've talked about already. So that's kind of a real quick 3-minute review of where we are now. So Boston is freed. Where are, from the British occupation, where are the British soldiers going to head next? Well, Washington knows where they're going. He knows they're going to go to New York and New Jersey, that region, because that is a loyalist kind of stronghold. There's a lot of loyalists, those that are remaining loyal to the king in New York. And so Washington heads to New York to try to defend that from the British. Patriots are outnumbered and untrained, and Washington at this point realizes very clearly he's not going to be able to defeat the British Army in this way at this time, but the key for him is simply survival. If he can keep his army alive and keep his army together, they can live to fight another day. And so he loses a series of battles, retreating from New York to Pennsylvania, and you can see here in the image, basically retreat, battle, fight, retreat, constantly retreating. Well, that's successful in that it's keeping his army alive, but the morale of the army is quite low, and they're ready to, many of them are ready to give up. They didn't sign up for this idea of just retreating. They signed up. They wanted to beat the British, and all they're doing now is really running. And so they've actually retreated into Pennsylvania. Trenton has some soldiers, some Hessian soldiers, and we will now move to what's going to happen is Washington realizes at Trenton that there's an opportunity for victory. So this is a famous painting of Washington crossing the Delaware. The image is not the way it would have looked. It's a heroic image of the Americans. It shows various characters. It shows obviously Washington prominently, but in a boat like this with the waters like such as they are, he certainly would not be standing like that, likely to easily fall out of the boat. And so this is a heroic image showing Washington leading his men across the Delaware River. They certainly do cross the Delaware River and do so successfully, but it takes quite a long time. So let's get into this a little bit. So with morale low, as we talked about, Washington knows he needs a victory, and they cross the Delaware River on Christmas night and launches a surprise attack against the Hessians. Hessians are German soldiers that have been hired by the British to fight. So the British not only have their own army here, but they've paid what we call mercenaries. They've paid people to fight on their side. And so they surprise the Hessians. The Patriots capture almost 2/3 of them. Not to be, often it's said that they were, all asleep in bed because they were drunk from the night before, from a day of Christmas cheer and celebration. It's not that. It's that they were surprised that anybody could, such a massive army could cross the river in conditions in one night and undetected. And so there was certainly a surprise, but it wasn't that they were completely caught off guard because they were all, as often told, drunk or anything like that or hungover. That was not the case. But this provides, not only were they able to cross the river, they were able to cross with cannons and everything like that. Those cannons were key to the victory. And this is a much needed victory after so many defeats. This is right at the end of the year. He's got a lot of soldiers that are about to be able, they're what they've signed up for, their time is up. They signed up for a year-long, basically a 1-year agreement to fight, and that year is coming up, and that Washington needed a victory so that he could convince his army to stick together and stick with him. And this victory, in combination with the next couple of victories, proved to be vital in convincing the American soldier in his army to continue with him and re-sign up to fight continue the fight and keep the Continental Army alive. So let's continue on. So the Battle of Princeton, British General Cornwallis rushes back to recapture Trenton and corners Washington, he thinks. But what Washington has snuck away at night, and he has just a few people left behind keeping the fires going at Trenton, and making noise, so it sounds like there's an army still there. And while Cornwallis has rushed back to Trenton, Washington sneak attacks the British forces at Princeton. And so this is another victory, two twin victories that happen really close together, further bolstering the morale of the Americans. So once again, this gives America hope and brings some aid from France. It doesn't bring lots and lots of aid, but it does bring some. They hear of this news, of these victories, and they're like, okay, we'll send you some money to help out. They're keeping it secret at this point, but they don't want, but they are hopeful for the Americans, and this brings a little bit of hope. So the conclusion, this is what I'm going to ask for you to do in your discussion post, is write a 1-sentence summary of each of these things: the New York and New Jersey campaign, the Battle of Trenton, not the Second Battle of Trenton, we don't talk about that, and we didn't really talk about that, and the Battle of Princeton. So those three things: the New York and New Jersey campaign, what was that all about? The Battle of Trenton and the Battle of Princeton. 1-sentence summaries of each of those things.